This week, Noriko Bouffard and Marco Genovese from Google are with us to discuss the evolving role of the browser in the enterprise. Then, Chad Cardenas from the Syndicate Group joins us to talk about his firm's alternative approach to investing. Finally, in the enterprise security news, it has been a while since we had a security unicorn, but we've got one. Island raises $100 million at a $1.5 billion valuation. A busy week for funding with 10 more good-sized rounds. Forget juice jacking. You should be more worried about adapters, cables, and dongles. Okta's breach impacts Beyond Trust, 1Password, Cloudflare, maybe more. Threat-informed defense is hard, which is why no one's doing it. A bank attempts to ban texting in 2023. Guess how that's going to go. Some new tools, how to exit Nano, bad visualizations, all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Cyber threats target digital identities. Do you know who or what is accessing your company's apps, systems, and data? You need to know who's there, who to let in, and who to keep out. And you'll need more than access management to stay secure. You need SailPoint Identity Security. As the leader in identity security, SailPoint can help mature your security resilience while driving efficiencies and compliance for your organization. Start your identity journey with SailPoint's free maturity assessment. Go to securityweekly.com/SailPoint to get your free identity security assessment today. If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In this world, phish credentials are useless to attackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for IT. The good news is, you don't have to imagine this world. You can just start using Collide. Visit securityweekly.com/Collide to watch a demo today. That's securityweekly.com/KOLIDE. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly, and happy National Pumpkin Day. Not to be confused with pumpkin spice, that gets like 2 or 3 months. This is episode 337, recorded on Thursday, October 26, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, the Captain of Content, Katie Tytler. How you doing, Katie?
I'm well. Happy Pumpkin Day to you.
Do you have any pumpkin plans?
I do have pumpkin plans. I'm having a pumpkin party this weekend. Everything's going to have pumpkin.
So you eating pumpkin, carving pumpkins? What is going on?
There will be no pumpkin carving. No. I'm way too clumsy for that. I'm having a small group of friends over, and everybody's bringing a pumpkin dish, and then somebody will be crowned the pumpkin king or queen. So lots of pumpkin items, from sweet to savory to alcohol.
Wow. And just so everyone knows, I had no idea Katie was having a pumpkin party. That was complete coincidence that I chose that out of the 16 national and international days that are, sitting on this date.
So I have 2 recipes that I've tried already. A pumpkin sausage and kale pot pie, which is outstanding. And then a pumpkin cake with buttercream frosting and chocolate ganache. It is the most requested item in my household, even in like July and February. So,
wow.
So that will be there for sure. And then I just learned how to make a pumpkin martini.
Wow. Yeah, I might have to check on flights in New England this weekend.
Yeah, please come. Bring something and enter for a chance to win a completely insignificant, absurd prize.
That sounds good. I mean, I'll just come for the food. I don't need the prizes. The food is the prize. All right, a quick announcement here. Join us for one of our Identiverse regional events, which I just now found out that we have, coming up on December 1st in New York City and December 5th in Chicago. Seems very cool. Participate alongside local experts and regional peers in information-rich sessions on the latest technologies, best practices, and industry trends. Secure your complimentary registration at securityweekly.com/IDV Regional Events 2023. All right, so this first interview is sponsored by Google Chrome Enterprise. And today's topic is the evolving role of the enterprise browser. I'm very excited to have Noriko Bouffard, Global Lead of Chrome Browser Customer Engineering, with us today. Welcome, Noriko.
Thanks. It's a mouthful, Adrian. Nice to be here.
Yeah, no problem. I'll get there. I'll eventually get there. We also have Marco Genovese, Head of BeyondCorp Enterprise Architecture, with us today. Welcome, Marco.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Nice to meet everybody, and excited to chat about Zero Trust and secure enterprise browsing today.
Yeah, and this is I'm very excited to have you guys on here. We've joked I've joked with you guys in private. Well, it's not a joke. Like I've mentioned many times on this podcast, you can go back and hear me talk about saying things like, "Man, I wish Google would advertise this more." I wish they'd share this more, because I feel like nobody knows about all these enterprise features that are baked into Google Chrome. And I was hearing it from my CISO friends. So one of them we often have on the podcast, Guillaume Ross, is probably the one I first heard from. Him leveraging all these enterprise features in Chrome, and I wasn't aware of them either back then. So I'm so glad that we're having you on to talk about this stuff today.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to be on as well. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity. It is sometimes, unfortunately, one of our best kept secrets is all of the integrated capabilities we have within Chrome, not just for security, but for management as well. So we're really glad to be able to come talk to you and to your listeners about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's build a foundation here and talk about. I don't think we have to talk too much about the importance of the browser. I don't think there's too many people who are unaware of how much time they spend in a browser and how important that browser is. We've seen browser security come a long way, and I can't remember the last time I heard about drive-by download attacks and things like that. Like, browser security itself has come a long way. But as it's kind of become the main tool, the main way that everybody accesses their business apps, most business apps are now SaaS, right? And even if you're managing your cloud stuff, you're probably also using a web browser, or at least APIs for part of that. So web browsers are really central. And I liked some of your marketing said performance, reliability, and speed are no longer enough. And I do remember the days when those were very much not there yet. And browser performance, reliability, browsers would crash. Some web pages would be really slow. Maybe people didn't know how to build for them. But we certainly are past that point now, I think. And maybe I don't know who wants to talk about it, but when did we start to see the move towards enterprise features here, and what are maybe the high level we can cover what some of those enterprise features are? I'm going to start with you, Noriko, first.
For sure. Well, we just celebrated our 15th birthday for Chrome, I want to say in September. And for a good chunk of that time, we've actually, for more than a decade, have also had enterprise capabilities to manage in Chrome. So that's sort of, again, another potentially untapped opportunity for enterprises to just leverage what's there. But we have seen a steady shift towards having more security-based integrations within Chrome that you could leverage. And I think a big part of it, and I've been in this role for 6 years now, and talking to enterprises throughout that whole time, I've seen a pretty big shift, I'd say, after COVID or throughout COVID, where enterprise security controls around the endpoint started to have to change drastically. And so being able to leverage the browser to be able to add extra security visibility has been a thing that we've seen, or I want to say over the last three plus years.
Yeah. And just kind of, chiming in on this, it's interesting with our zero trust approach, right? and how we've gone about that. We needed an endpoint, right? We needed some way to posture a device and understand the state of that device. And because of the prevalence of Chrome, even in the enterprise, right, but just around the globe, having an agent, essentially, right, Chrome, and having an agentless approach, allowing for that install base, which is over 3 billion devices at this point, to be able to collect telemetry from an endpoint and use that as part of context-aware access controls, or least privilege access to applications, resources, and data, and becoming a control vector was really, really important. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We were able to use something that was already pre-existing in most customer environments around the world. So it was very beneficial. And working with Noriko and her team and the tooling that they put in place, we've been able to kind of be an additive security tool in the enterprise. So like data protection controls, things like malware protection, and the ability for us to integrate through and through has been a huge benefit for our customers.
Yeah, and I think when we chatted before, I remember mentioning you almost have to do it there, right? You just have so much more ability to secure things right at the point where it's happening. It's in a world where almost all network and internet traffic is encrypted. Inline tools get very tricky. A lot of companies don't like breaking and reassembling network connections and things like that. So it really makes sense to do it on the endpoint, and that's where most of this is happening anyway. Is right there in the browser. So it totally makes sense to build these features into the browser itself.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's interesting that you bring up that point. And what we've seen is that gaining that visibility is difficult, especially when it comes down to devices maybe that you don't control, that are unmanaged, for example. It becomes near impossible, right? You can't go and deploy a certificate to some contractor or partner or some other entity's machine and then expect for them, to kind of go along with your security policies and controls. The browser puts us in a completely different scenario, right, where we can see what's going on, right, between, let's say, an endpoint and the application itself, protect the data without doing like SSL, like termination or inspection. From a privacy perspective, it's an awesome, right, way to do these things. And then as well, it's essentially having the endpoint, right, do and take those kind of actions versus having to backhaul or hairpin and inspect traffic like we used to back in the day with a proxy or a firewall or some other kind of tool. So it really gives the customer a lot more control. It also provides a better overall user experience as well, right? Because not just being denied, instead it can be educational. You can't print this data because it contains, customer records or something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah. So my next question is kind of around like when did it make sense to add this to go on this journey for Google? I remember a time when Microsoft Windows didn't have a built-in firewall. It didn't have whole disk encryption built in. It didn't have antivirus built in. These were all third-party products you would buy from somebody else. And I guess it's always a challenge for somebody who makes like a popular software application, whether that be an operating system or an app that runs on the operating system, whether or not to partner with third-party vendors to help make that possible, or whether to just do it yourself. So maybe help me understand the journey to decide to build these in yourselves.
Noriko, I don't know if you want to chime in. I'm happy to.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like our journey at Google sort of started with our own breach back in 2009, and I think that's what made us take a different path than what would be more traditional to a lot of other companies with different agents on the endpoint. We decided that, and I'll let Marco go into this more deeper because you were kind of there with Google at the time, right? Being able to take a step back and take a different approach where it's an agentless approach, leveraging the browser to be able to basically assume breach, don't trust the network, don't trust the device, and only give access based on what you know about the posture of that device and that person. So that's really kind of has been our journey. And I think more recently, again, just where work has changed, where a lot of the industry has come up to that point where you said earlier, Adrian, cloud and web usage is just continuing to grow. Browser usage continues to grow. So being able to use the browser as that point of security has really hit that tipping point where we see other enterprises now ready to sort of take the model that we've been putting out there. Marco, did you want to add more?
And I think we're in a unique place as well, because of, again, the prevalence of the Chrome browser. And we have built a lot of this tooling into the Chrome browser, but we want our customers also to have options. So we have this partner ecosystem as well that allows for us to kind of extend the reach, the visibility, and the control. So, customers might have like a CrowdStrike EDR, and Chrome has the ability to collect telemetry from their risk scoring and such to make determinations based on the state of an endpoint, right? Based on what the EDR client might be telling BeyondCorp as a tool to the Chrome browser, whether or not they should be able to access a resource based on the state of the device and what the EDR is saying. But the kind of same goes for things like feeding this data into our own Chronicle security analytics platform, right? Our findings on an endpoint, the data, how the users are interacting with that data, or maybe feed this into a Splunk because customers aren't necessarily using our security analytics platform. And so building this partner ecosystem has been a huge part of kind of what secure enterprise browsing is bringing to the table. Or maybe using like a third-party, DLP technology as well, maybe like a Symantec or a Trellix or something else to that effect. And so Google, we tend to kind of build more flexible solutions that will allow for us to kind of encompass our partner ecosystem. But then we also build our own, right, DLP engine and our own URL filtering and our own malware, sandboxing, and detonation services that are part of the overall secure enterprise browsing solution. So I think it really comes down to options, right? People want options, customers want options. It's not a one shoe fits all at the end of the day. But it's definitely built, like Noriko said, off of our own learnings over the years, over the past decade plus, in response to things like nation state attacks, and the fact that at this point, it's enriching. 80+% of enterprise applications now are web applications, and all that traffic is coming over HTTPS typically, and so you need to have the control in the browser.
Yeah. So from there, and just to clarify, I think this is Operation Aurora that we're talking about that happened back in 2010.
That's right.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And sorry.
No, I was going to add a little bit to what Marco was saying, and I think a lot of reasons why customers haven't. I think let me stand back. I think the Chrome approach to helping enterprises leverage our capabilities has always been, meet them where they're at, and that started with how we deployed policies at the very beginning. Recognizing that a lot of customers leverage Windows, so being able to manage Chrome very easily using Windows policies, and then onto other platforms as well. So being able to meet them where they're at and being able to do it very simply. A lot of what we've done too, a lot of customers don't realize, is that you don't need a different version of Chrome to be enterprise. So in that regard, I commonly get these questions from customers like, what do I need to buy to be Chrome Enterprise, or what kind of binary do I need? The answer is pretty simple. If you already have Chrome in your environment and you want to put it under management or deem it enterprise, you just need to apply the policies, push them out as you normally have them, or you could leverage our cloud-based policy management, which has really been, we call it Chrome Browser Cloud Management on the side, but essentially it's being able to push cloud policies, which then, during the COVID time was super helpful because you didn't need to have your users signing on to VPN to get policies pushed. And so that was really helpful, especially when there was a critical update that you needed to sort of force a relaunch or force an update of Chrome, because most users don't like to close out Chrome. So those were very handy things that customers could leverage for free straight away. So I often found it to be really great to tell customers, hey, you feel like Chrome, and this is what I've seen a lot commonly, maybe not so much these days, but I've talked to folks from the security side saying Chrome is a shadow IT problem because users just deploy Chrome, download it themselves, and they don't feel like they have a way to manage. But it's quite simple. You can just push a policy to that device, and Chrome will then be managed regardless of how it was installed on the machine. So it's a really easy and quick way, low-hanging fruit, if you will, to enhance your security posture with Chrome on your managed devices.
Well, I've got to point out that there was some amazing work done to make, I think security. You mentioned nobody likes to close out Chrome, but I want to push back on that a little bit because I remember the days where if your browser crashed or if you closed it by mistake or your computer blue screened or rebooted, like you lost a bunch of stuff in your browser. And we've come a really long way to the point now where sometimes my computers will reboot themselves to apply patches or something like that. And I come back to them. And the only reason I know that it's rebooted is maybe, Spotify is auto started or something like that. And I remember not leaving it like that. But otherwise, like my tabs are there, like everything is right where I remember it. Even if I was typing something into a text box, it's still there. So I feel like that's gone a long way to make it much less painless for somebody to reboot, restart a browser. I don't know if the browser has to be restarted for policies to apply, but it's so painless now that I feel like I need to call that out because that makes it a lot easier. The reduction in friction on your end users to have to do a restart.
100%. I think there's a lot that we've done around. Oh, sorry.
Go for it, Noriko. No, you're fine.
Yeah, I'll just say in terms of update controls and policies, we've done a lot there to give flexibility to enterprises to make sure that we don't force an update during the middle of a workday, or if you're in a call center situation, you don't want to be forcing a reboot or forcing a relaunch of Chrome halfway through a call. So being able to give controls as to when that's going to happen, also give warnings to the user so they have a chance to choose themselves when it's time to relaunch. These are really helpful aids for admins to work with their end users to get them on the latest version to be more secure and avoid exposure to browser vulnerabilities. Marco, you wanted to add a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's funny because we always talk about, Chrome, it's using more memory than it used to, right? Because we're using more applications. And, if you think about rebooting your machine, you'll have maybe 20 tabs open with different applications that are being used, for example. And you'll notice, like, when you reboot, it says, hey, do you want to restore the tabs? Because we're actually taking snapshots, keeping tabs, no pun intended, on where the user is within the browser, and then restoring that. To your point, it's become an operating system for the internet, essentially, right? It's the ability for the user to now interact with these applications. And so it's critical that the user experience is going to be a good user experience, right? And they're not going to be impacted negatively. And things like policy, to your point, we can refresh, and we do continuously refresh and push new policies, even for secure enterprise browsing, right? And controls that will be enacted on the browser for the user, the data that's being downloaded, uploaded, copied, pasted, printed within that browser. These policies, these CBCM policies on the browser itself, are seamlessly updated in the background, right? Silently, independently from the user having to interact or do anything. And so it overall has become a much more powerful tool in the enterprise. And you see that continuing on into the future as we add new features and functionality. The beauty of this is, to Noriko's point earlier, when we release, Chrome 115, 116, 117, and 118, these features continue to be added. And the user doesn't have to do anything. Much like Windows updates, like you were saying, right? It's just going to auto-update in the background, and then the user just takes advantage of the new functionality, which is huge, in my opinion.
So what, if anything, do end users notice if the security team or even the IT ops team decides to, improve the security on the browser using this? Is there any indication immediately to users, or do they just keep doing what they're doing, basically?
I'll take
So
this
you
one.
kind of have the best of both worlds on that front, right? So as an administrator with Chrome Enterprise, you can turn on or turn off features and functionality. You can manage the actual updates themselves of the browser in an enterprise fashion, like you would with like a normal operating system. And when new features and functionality come out, and you may have noticed this, but the users can be notified, right, of a new feature or functionality and say, hey, were you aware that this now is available to you within the browser, and you can take advantage of it, right? So in an enterprise, you have the control and you have the ability to manage all of that centrally and make the user experience even better. And obviously in the consumer product, we also make users aware of new functionality, new security features as they're added to the Chrome browser. But that's a great point to bring up, right? That is critical in the enterprise. Noriko,
I was going to add, so, we really do want to make sure that the end users are aware that they're being managed. And so we do have, a symbol that will come out. If you go to the settings page, it will say you're managed by Corp. So at least that way you know, and you have signals that, okay, this instance, if I'm signed in with my Corp credentials, or if I'm on a managed device and I have policies applied to all instances of Chrome, as a user of Chrome, I'll see that, okay, I am being managed by my environment. But from the admin side of the house, where a lot of them would prefer their end users not have to interact or do something to come under management, we've also made that very simple and seamless in that the user just does not need to do anything in order to be brought into management. Katie, I think, was that part of your question?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's incredibly important. You don't want it to be a secret. You want people to know what's there, but at the same time, you don't want to make it cumbersome or onerous on them, because the first thing that happens when you tell a user, "Hey, we're applying the security policies," is they flip out.
or they'll blame every problem on it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think users like to have transparency, and so it is possible to see what policies are being applied to your device. In fact, I like to educate people. If you just go to your Chrome, open up the Omnibox, open up Chrome and type into the Omnibox Chrome://policy, and you're on a managed device. Unless you've been blocked from going to that site by policy, you'd be able to see what policies are being applied by your administrators. So there is transparency from that side, and it does help with troubleshooting on that as well. But again, from an admin side, they'd prefer to be able to not have to have end users. It becomes a brittle enterprise solution if we require end users to have to do something. On that other point, though, Katie, to some of the capabilities that BeyondCorp Enterprise can do around DLP controls, there are ways to educate the user with, UI to say, hey, like what you're trying to do, you're trying to print something, we're going to warn you, we're going to block you. So there's ways that we can also signal by policy to say, hey, this is something that we prefer you not to do. So it's an intentional interaction with the end user.
Yeah, so I want to dive into what makes what we're talking about when we talk about enterprise features. So we've already, we've been talking about policies, and just on my browser, I went to Chrome ://policies just to see what was there. But yeah, let's Noriko, let's dive into talking about like what specifically some of these features are. What companies can leverage here from the version of Chrome that's already deployed, that they already have available to them, and what makes those features enterprise.
Sure. So yeah, we have had a core set of policies and capabilities within Chrome Enterprise, as I mentioned, built over a decade. And some of the core functionalities that we see customers like to leverage, and we have over 400 different policies as well. If you look at our Chrome Policy Enterprise policy list, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but I think really the gist of a lot of them come into categories around hardening the security postures or the defaults that we have within Chrome. So we have Google Safe Browsing that protects all of our users of Chrome, not only consumer but end users. Enterprise users. So if we're going to, we have real-time views of phishing and malware, malicious sites that we would, show are those. If you've ever hit that a red interstitial, big red page that says, do not continue. We try to put friction in between the user towards the dangerous site. Enterprises leverage that too. They use that to educate their users to say, hey, if you see that, report it, don't click. But there's policies to be able to prevent users from, one, turning it off, because consumer users could basically go and turn that setting off. So could enterprise users if you haven't hardened that policy. So that's just one example. But the other areas that we see customers leveraging our policies are around update controls. So we talked a little bit about that, right? So being able to have customized ways of controlling how Chrome updates. We have customers that love being on the front end of being on the latest and greatest to keep their browsers protected from the latest security vulnerabilities. However, we have a lot of customers that have older applications that they have to test and go through more rigorous checks before they can update to know that they won't be breaking some of those legacy applications. And so we have controls there to allow them to pin to certain versions, taking that choice between, being more safe from your browser's vulnerabilities to being more stable in your business operations. So that's another whole area of capabilities. We have the areas around extension management. So that can be you have the best of both worlds.
Right?
Absolutely,
That's a huge one.
It is a huge one. A lot of customers we've seen, it's been Wild West for them. They didn't maybe realize that extensions is an area they should be looking more into. It definitely helps their users have that productivity, the customization that users like to have on their own browser. But there can be some extensions out there that might have powerful controls that you as an enterprise or from a security lens want to make sure that you can manage that. And so there's a lot that we can do with extension policy management to, one, first of all, get visibility to everything that's running in your environment. That has been a difficult thing in the past, but we've made that very easy to enroll your Chrome browsers into our cloud management console and get a ton of reporting around what extensions are in your environment to sort of take a step back, audit what you have, and then be able to then decide what kind of enforcements you have. We have something like extension workflow. So if you want to have an interaction with your users to say, we're going to have a posture of blocking all extensions, but we want to know what extensions you do want to have. We have a workflow to be able to have users from the Chrome Web Store be able to say, hey, I'd like to request this. That way you can go through your own rigorous security analysis to see whether this is something you want to allow or you allow, but with certain restrictions based on permissions. So there's a lot of things you can do around extensions there as well. So I haven't even talked about all of them, but it's really about visibility, control on updates, giving sort of a unified experience around how Chrome is being used in enterprise.
Yeah, and I think that visibility is pretty huge. It's especially that Chrome Enterprise covers all the platforms, right? Even the device type that is Chrome, the Chromebooks, Mac OS, Linux, Windows, and even mobile. You can see what version everybody's running, and you can see all those extensions. I imagine pretty much every company that looks at the extensions deployed across their enterprise is probably in for at least a few surprises.
For sure, and just as a public service announcement for extensions, the extension ecosystem is updating themselves to Manifest v3, which is the Chrome extension group and engineering group, moving it to a more privacy, security preserving platform. That being said, Manifest v2 extensions, there are a lot out there, and if enterprises are not prepared for that deprecation, it is coming. We have policies to help protect you. So that's the other area I'd say of policy control that we have, is to be able to help give an escape hatch to enterprises when we are doing things to advance the web around security or feature capabilities that may break legacy technologies. We have policies to kind of help give you a little bit more time to get what you need to get done. A perfect example is when Flash had to be deprecated. Having a policy to be able to kind of keep that lifeline going until the very end, at least helped some enterprises get to a better state without completely breaking their business processes. Sorry, Marco, I think you wanted to add something.
No, I think you pretty much nailed it on that front. I think that having a good foundational approach to securing the browsers and an organization is paramount. And then layering on additional security controls, right? And I think for us, it was one of those kind of defining moments where we realized, hey, we can put a lot of the existing tooling, right, in an enterprise into the browser. Things like, for example, proxy, doing things like URL filtering, right, based on categories and blocking things like gambling sites, for example, or adult websites, or whatever they might be that you might want to remove from the enterprise. Why not do that within the browser? And then extend that to the data layer itself, right? If data that contains social security numbers, credit card information should be leaving the organization, let's take actions to prevent that. Or even interactions that we couldn't necessarily take in traditional proxies, like copy and paste and printing of data based on the contents and the context of the device. Because we know who the user is in the browser, we know what the data is that they're interfacing with, we know the state of the device that the browser is running on. So building powerful enterprise features like data protection controls into the browser just made sense. But in addition to that, because we have the visibility without needing to decrypt, right, everything that's transiting that network to that device, why not do things like malware detection, do static content analysis, run YAR rules against it. Let's detonate potential malware in sandboxes and determine whether or not it's malicious and prevent it from going and poisoning your application stack as a customer or impacting the endpoint itself negatively. And so adding all these enterprise features to the Chrome browser just makes sense in the end of the day, right? It's going to protect, users can protect the applications, the organization. And that's where we're headed with all of this. And that's what we've been introducing over the past few years.
Yeah, so I want to kind of pivot here and just make clear most of the stuff we've been talking about with Noriko is free. Like you have it right now. If you have Chrome, you can use these enterprise features. Does that include the dashboard like that you use to manage these policies and push these policies?
Right. So everything I've spoken to, some of the things that Marco had talked about there, go into some of our more advanced paid offerings that we've put out with BeyondCorp Enterprise that leverages Chrome integrations. But the things that I've mentioned are really part of our core capabilities that are free to use and have been free to use for as long as we've had enterprise policies. So there is something that we launched, I want to say back in 2019, which is our ability to manage Chrome devices or Chrome instances at the device level from cloud. So most administrators have been managing Chrome through Windows GPO or plist for Mac and Linux, or pushing policies through MDM for iOS and Android. However, the Chrome Browser Cloud Management is the platform leveraging the Google Admin Console. If people are familiar with how they manage Google Workspace today, we basically leverage that platform to be able to push a token to your instances. And from there, you don't need identity even, but from there you can manage policies or manage the browsers across all of the devices or all the instances of Chrome on that device rather. And so that console or that dashboard that you mentioned is really leveraging our Google Admin Console. And that is free to if you want to get started with managing Chrome, there is a free path to sign up to be able to get access to that and get started. And that token push is not at all, there's no end user interaction, and that's where a lot of admins are just really happy to get started with visibility. So they've been managing policies with GPO for a long time, and they're like, I'm not so sure I'm ready for the change management to go to cloud quite yet. Other admins are just like, oh my God, this is so much easier for me to be able to push a single policy to all my platforms. But some are just like, I really want to get a sense of what's going on in my fleet, and especially around extensions. Let's get started there. So being able to push that token to your entire fleet, then start with reporting, see what's there, is a huge win for a lot of our customers that have deployed it.
So it sounds like for people already using Google Workspace for their organization, they already have access to this stuff. It sounds like.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
it's right.
It's right there. So they should take a look at under Chrome or Chrome devices, depending on what their domain's looking like. But yeah, there's a way right away to get started.
All right, awesome. And yeah, now I want to pivot a little bit more to the advanced side, to the stuff that you can pay for. A few times already here, Marco, you've mentioned zero trust access. So maybe just make sure we have time for things. I definitely want to touch on the BeyondCorp capabilities here.
Yeah. For sure. I'm not happy to talk about that. Sorry for chiming in. I got a little excited earlier.
No,
but yeah,
you don't have to apologize.
On that. Yeah, just to kind of clarify on that front, right? There are certain pieces of it that we include that are inherently part of the platform, and you can kind of back to like workspace, for example. You can wrap what we call context-aware access control policies on workspace applications as part of like a workspace Enterprise Plus subscription. And there's other functionality, like what I was kind of discussing earlier, where we can go even lower level and we can start marrying together like data protection policies with context of a device, and then introduce controls on a user and on a browser. And these are paid features. Things like preventing a copying or pasting of data to, let's say, an application that maybe it doesn't belong in. We can do based on the contents, right, of that data. So we can run machine learning models that will detect on particular information, and then based on maybe like API access keys being uploaded to a cloud service where they don't belong, will actually block and warn the user that they don't belong there and they shouldn't be taking those kind of actions. And these are paid features within BeyondCorp based on the state of the device, for example, maybe it being a personal device versus a corporate-owned device. We can communicate to that endpoint and determine if it's encrypted, if it's patched, if it's up to date, for example, if it's running an EDR endpoint. And then based on the state of that machine and the fact that the user is interfacing with, let's say, financial information, we can allow for it to be downloaded to that device. But if they try to do the same thing with those user credentials as that user on a personal device, while they might be able to access the application, they can't actually download right to that personal device, right? So these are features of, again, what we call BeyondCorp Enterprise. And it's basically giving more advanced tooling to the enterprise as they need it. Other things are going to be reporting, right, and advanced analytics that come out of this. So when the users do take those actions, or maybe they potentially like upload malware or download malware, reporting on this information and taking actions depending on those flows is all part of more advanced, feature set from BeyondCorp itself. The ability for you to block access to certain applications based on categories, right? This would be another advanced feature set where maybe I'm going to standardize on Google Drive, but I don't want people necessarily uploading data to secure file store com or whatever it might be, and so we can go ahead and again just block outright to those other file sharing sites, or maybe based on the content of that data, right? So again, I don't want my financial records going to some random file storage site, so I'm going to block those categories and I'm going to allow Google Drive to be used. And so all that functionality is licensable as part of BeyondCorp. And it can be used, to your point earlier, Adrian, across Linux, Mac, Windows, right, Chrome OS. You have an entire landscape of operating systems that can be supported because, again, it's just the Chrome browser that's actually introducing the functionality and the features.
Right. Yeah, and just to clarify, some of the the network access features of that, like how far does that expand? I thought at one point like you could even enable that for fat clients, but maybe that was maybe that was sunsetted. I don't know if anybody was actually ever using that, or if that's just for web-based apps that are behind firewalls.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we actually can facilitate for this outside of just web-based applications. So our zero trust access controls, so we call access or context-aware access like policies that we can apply, can be applied on things like an RDP session or SSH. It could be something like SCP in a file, and we can actually enact those same policies. And we actually use the Chrome browser to determine the state of the device that's trying to connect to those resources and facilitate for it. We're really trying to get away from just allowing access, though, right? With web applications, we can apply a lot better control into the data itself. Whereas if you're just looking at allowing connectivity to, let's say, a VM that I want to access by an SSH session, while we can validate and verify the state of the device and then allow access based on that in a real true zero trust methodology, it's not necessarily going to be as powerful, right, if I can't control all aspects, right, and all interactions with the data. But to answer your question, yes, we can facilitate really for any TCP communication without the need for a VPN. And so that's definitely an area that my customers have shown interest in.
Awesome. All right, and one more thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we wrapped here is that you also have a lot of integrations with third parties. Like everything we've been talking about so far has been native features that Google provides, that Chrome can provide. But it sounds like you also have a lot of reporting and integration features with third parties as well.
Yeah. So we've actually built quite a few integrations. Obviously, our native Chronicle, right, which is our security, like advanced security analytics platform, which definitely plays in like the SIEM arena, but extends it with advanced tooling, is one thing that we can write directly into a unified data model, and that becomes extremely powerful when you're doing threat hunting, for example. But we also built connectors with, for example, like CrowdStrike, so we can feed all this data into CrowdStrike. So because they want better visibility into the web application traffic and what users are doing, and they can't typically get that without something like this. Same goes with like Palo Alto Networks, which we have native integrations we can feed into. Same goes with Splunk, for example. Or customers might have any other solution, and so you can use PubSub, and you can actually feed this anywhere you want to in the enterprise and get that rich telemetry that you'd want to see. It is very powerful. We've built several different integrations, and even as far as tying in with like third-party MDM providers, like the Jamps of the world, Workspace ONE, for example, and even Microsoft Intune is fully supported. And so we really believe in this kind of open architecture and to work with these partners and other tools that customers have, so that they don't have to necessarily just leverage us, but they can leverage the best of breed within the enterprise, and then use that to secure their environment how they deem necessary and fit. And that's really how we go about things here with that secure enterprise browser that customers are leveraging.
Great. And I think that's about all we have time for today, but I do want to point out that we've got some great links in the show notes today. We've got there's a complimentary Gartner report on the future of enterprise browsers, a link that you can go to learn more about getting started with the core features of Chrome Enterprise, and then another link that you can click to get into the more advanced features, and also a recording from Google Cloud Next. That's a customer spotlight that I had time to watch part of, which was interesting. So go to the show notes, check out those links. And Noriko and Marco, thank you so much for joining me today. This is something I've been wanting to make happen for quite a while.
Thanks so much, Adrian. It was great to meet you, and happy Pumpkin Day, everyone.
All right, and stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk early stage startup investments with Chad Cardenas from the Syndicate Group. And we'll be right back. If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing. We found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today. Visit securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners, we are celebrating the milestone of reaching over 1,000 members of our CISO community. The Cybersecurity Collaboration Forum is a one-stop shop for executive collaboration comprised of CISOs across various industries. If you want to be part of this growing community of CISOs, join us as a member or technology partner. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity collaboration. All right, and for our second interview, Chad Cardenas joins us today to talk about alternative approaches to startup funding. He's the CEO and founder of the Syndicate Group, or TSG. Chad previously co-founded Trace3, where he served as president and chief innovation officer, studying macro trends in the IT industry and their effects on the VC startup channel, CXO, and investor communities. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, it's interesting. This is one of our favorite topics, I think, to dive into. If you've ever watched one of our news segments, we love to dive into the market. Myself, Katie, and Tyler have all been industry analysts, so perhaps that's part of it. Tyler is also an angel investor, so I wanted to make sure and have him on here. And actually, Tyler, you weren't on the last segment, so I should welcome you. How you doing?
Oh, thank you, my friend. I appreciate that, Adrian. Yeah, good to see you. And Chad, good to see you as well. I've definitely seen your name floating around in circles, so good to meet you, my friend.
Likewise, great to meet you.
All right, so let's get started with some of the story behind TSG, because, and from here on out, I'll just say TSG just to simplify it. Looks like that's what you do in a lot of your materials as well. But very, very much a non-standard approach to investment from what we've seen from, we've seen more and more creative stuff over the last 5 years or so, but this one still seems fairly unique. So I want to kind of understand the story behind it, why go this route and not a traditional VC route with LPs?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely non-traditional, still relatively foreign concept, I think, among some circles within the industry, but it started with, and I'm going to make certain assumptions about the audience's familiarity with the industry, but just, if there's anything that I need to go into in more detail or clarify, please, let me know. I'm happy to, of course. But my last business that you mentioned, Trace3, was a very successful VAR integration business, what's commonly referred to as a channel company. And we had a very intense focus on emerging tech. We basically believed that if we could be at least early to market, maybe in some cases first to market with the next great enterprise tech product and company, it would set us apart from a lot of the competition. And so we built a lot of internal programs around that, an innovation team, a research team. We built relationships in Silicon Valley with the entrepreneur communities and the venture community. And that model worked for us as a channel business, but for me, it exposed what I thought were a couple key gaps in the industry. In particular, very highly strategic individuals and entities within a startup's ecosystem were largely left out of the investment side of that relationship. And I just thought if the right model was created to where those entities, those individuals who were helping a company, a startup get to market by selling the product, marketing the product, or even some of the individuals that were helping the company grow by buying the product, if they could be given access to invest in those companies, then everybody would win. So long story short, we started tinkering with that model when I was still at Trace3. I put together special purpose vehicles We'd take a small allocation in a round of funding alongside the lead VCs. And then we would fill that allocation with myself and my peers in the business with our own personal capital. We did that with companies like Nutanix, AppDynamics, Cohesity, CrowdStrike was a big one. And everybody celebrated that model because it works so well on a relatively small scale. So when we had a private equity event with Trace3 in 2017, I left to start TSG to build out that model at scale as a standalone business and outside the confines of any one, channel company. So we're essentially a venture firm that does not, by design, invest out of a fund, but instead we have hundreds of channel businesses, thousands of individuals that work for those companies, and dozens of CXOs and CISOs that make up our investor base, and we bring them to bear when we're working with a company.
So I'll probably let Tyler jump in here in a moment, but before we get there, help me out with, so Tyler's been my educator on a lot of the terminology from the investment world, the stuff that I didn't pick up from when I was an industry analyst, but so SPVs, yeah, I know what SPACs are, but help me out with that term.
Yeah, so very high level, in venture terms. So most big name, brand name venture firms that you're familiar with, they raise a fund. Capital comes from places like university endowments, pension funds, multi-billion-dollar family offices. These are, it's tens, hundreds, maybe even billions of dollars. And then they invest out of that fund into a number of different startups. A special purpose vehicle is basically, it's a separate standalone entity. So we form a new LLC company for every investment that we make. And then that entity becomes the investing entity on the cap table of the startup. And so it's a single investment entity that arrives on the cap table of the startup, but then within that entity could be dozens and dozens of individuals that actually contributed the capital to the entity.
Got it. Thank you. That perfect explanation. I'm with you now.
Yeah, and so the main things, like in terms of why people invest this way, it's a way to organize a large number of relatively small, from a capital perspective, small investors, organize them all together into a single vehicle. And then for the startups, it's a way for them to get all the strategic value of all those smaller investors, but without the cap table complexities of having them all directly as investors in the business.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting model for sure. It's not something I've heard of before, where you're, for lack of a better term, I'll use the term LP. And for the audience that don't know what that is, that's a limiting partner or a limited partner. That's the people that are putting money into the SPVs. But your LPs are all channel resellers across the board uniformly, or do you kind of branch beyond that occasionally?
We branch beyond that occasionally. So we do have a lot of corporate technology executives, so CXOs, CISOs. That's probably the fastest growing portion of our investor base. And then we have some non-strategic investors that are not in either of those categories, and they just provide capital. That's a small percentage of our investors, but that helps us when we have an outsized allocation, and then with the permission of the startup, we can actually bring those folks in to just fill the allocation and close quickly.
Yeah, what I really dig about the model, Chad, quite frankly, is that it's in alignment, meaning the incentive structure for the limited partners, in this case, the channel sales teams, is they control their own destiny, right? They pick a horse. They say, hey, FD, Nutanix, whichever one it is, we believe that's the one that's going to dominate that market. We're going to get behind it, and we're going to resell that one specifically so they can provide their own fuel to the fire, right? Is that kind of the thought process behind in aligning the incentives between the different parties?
That's exactly it. That's really at the core of everything that we do, is aligning those incentives and goals and really driving behavior accordingly. It makes a difference when you have the ability to represent multiple different products in a given space within the industry. and you've made a decision based on your research, vetting the companies and everything. You've made a decision on one being the best and having the best long-term viability, so much so that you're willing to invest your own personal capital into that business. It really does drive behavior. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but there are examples of that on the early end of the spectrum with these startups, and then even on the more mature side, where these companies leverage the program to really capture that mind share and focus of their strategic ecosystem all the way through exit.
So how big are the LPs, the channel sales teams that are doing the investing, or the founders of the channel sales teams that are doing the investing? Do they range from, because channel sales can go down to MSP, MSSP levels, right? VAR levels that are very regional, very micro specific, all the way up through, your Optives and your Guide Points of the world, the big players, right? So do you go down market with the LP base, or do you kind of find a sweet spot where it's like here or larger tends to fit well?
Yeah, great question. Both. So we have those names that you mentioned and a lot of others in that category, very active in our network. And then we go all the way down to what I would refer to as more boutique and truly regional partners, like a security focused reseller integrator in New York or in the Southeast, like very small companies that a lot of folks have never heard of, but are very influential and powerful within their smaller kind of metro ecosystem, and they have great client relationships. So from that lower end all the way up to a couple of the names that you mentioned and others that are, $10-20 billion businesses.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and stop asking about the model, because I think it's pretty clear that the alignment of incentives is fantastic and it's giving you a force multiplier for the sales of those companies. Let me ask, actually, before I leave it, let me ask one more follow-on question. With the deals that you invest in, what stages are you looking for, right? So for the audience that don't understand venture capital, usually venture capital is raised and targeting a specific stage, seed, A, B, C, et cetera, growth funds, late stage, all different kinds of stages. And you raise those funds ahead of time saying, we're going to invest in, round B plus or B and C or late stage or whatever it is. And the LPs are committed to a certain space. How early do you find it fits well for the channel to back a company? So I've helped build a couple of companies in the past, and what I've found is there's kind of a sweet spot somewhere around, I don't know, let's call it 15 million of ARR, where the channel starts to get excited. They start to say, hey, there's traction here. We can add value. We can bring this to market alongside you, et cetera. At what point do you think it makes sense to take in equity from a channel-backed model like you do? Is it pre-seed? Is it BC? Or is it late stage that fits best?
Yeah, great points. It's typically from like maybe a mature A round, but really kind of like a series B and beyond. And to your point about, the channel in general getting excited about a company when they're 15 million in revenue and beyond, I think that's true. I think it's especially historically true, but it's shifting earlier. And we like to think that we are, with our program, we are encouraging that shift to much earlier on. So if we were having this conversation, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, a lot of enterprise tech companies at that time, they kind of had a decision to make, do we have a more direct model, or do we go through channels, build these relationships? And some of them did and some of them didn't. Today, I feel like any company on the B2B side of the industry that has a product or an offering that can in any way, shape, or form be sold and marketed through indirect sales, through a channel, if they don't do that, then they will be left behind. So it's way more common now for companies to realize earlier in their growth that they have to start building a healthy channel ecosystem. So for us, that means really like from 1 million to 5 million in ARR. We don't do any pre-seed or seed investing. The company has to have at least the beginnings of a go-to-market strategy, the beginnings of revenue, and the beginnings of like maybe their first couple channel partners. And then we come in and we help them accelerate that and launch it.
Yeah, and that's a huge problem, right? So having built up a couple of companies that got to the stage where we started to engage with channel partners, that's a difficult task. Typically, companies have to hire, at least one, if not two or three experts around building the channel to be able to be successful, to get the mind share. There's thousands, right? 3,000 plus, I believe the number is, competing cyber products. If we just stay in the cyber market only, we already recognize that you have, as a channel, you have to pick from thousands and thousands of products about which ones you're going to back and which ones you're going to sell to your customers. So, that I think that acceleration and expertise that you can bring to a late A, early B stage company really would help them from a process perspective, where many times they've been selling direct to that point. Does that fit kind of the model?
Excuse me, it's so true. The number of companies, pick any, you're right about cyber too, like any subcategory of cyber, and there's half a dozen or a dozen companies that kind of all maybe sound the same or are trying to solve the same problem with the same sounding solutions. Very difficult to distinguish among those companies. And by the way, to further complicate things, the channel industry is very crowded, and it can be very difficult if you don't know what you're doing. Very difficult to select the right partners at the right stage in your business. I always joke about how, and it's really not a joke, it's reality, how there are infinitely more ways to screw up a channel strategy or the execution of a channel strategy than there are to get it right. And so, yes, we see companies struggle with that all the time, and there's a real cost associated with getting it wrong and then having to revert back and start over.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how much of understanding how SPVs work that our audience has, and so we did have one question come in from the Discord asking specifically about whether your investors have influence on the investment targets. I'll let you explain how that works in the SPV world.
Yeah, so for us, we have, if I understand the question correctly, they do have, the way I understand the question is, do our investors have influence over which companies we decide to invest in? And if I'm getting that right, then
yeah, so that is absolutely the question. And I know you're going to dig into what an SPV means to answer that question, I presume.
Yes. So, and different SPV type of investing firms may do this differently. Like, this may not always be the case with all SPV investing, but for us, it's a big part of what we do, because our investors, by and large, they're not professional investors investing in tech to make money. First and foremost, they are industry aware, they're industry savvy, and they're operators really in the industry. And so they know the technology, they know the space, the competitive landscape, the industry. And so it's a big part of our diligence process and our selection process to actually take that input from our network of investors. It's a community of thousands of individuals that are living and breathing these technology problems and solutions on behalf of their clients every day. And so we have an online portal. We have a platform that we've built over the course of several years, and we've created a mechanism in there for folks to give real-time feedback on the companies that we are considering investing in. And if there's not a company listed in our platform, they can suggest one for us to take a look at, which we always wind up doing. And so, yes, short answer, yes. And that's a big difference between this type of investing and being a true LP or limited partner in a venture fund, where you're just, in that scenario, you're just committing capital up front, and the firm is making all of the decisions as to where that capital gets deployed.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, so I've run SPVs out of 90 Degree Ventures, my firm that I work with. And essentially the way that usually works is you pick an investment, you build up and get an allocation, and you fulfill that allocation by bringing in the investors to fulfill on the SPV. And in general, the way that most of those works, most of the SPVs in that model work is it's optional, right? You'll have a list of 1,000 potential investors, and you'll put it out there and say who wants in. They commit a chunk of capital, the investment gets fulfilled, and you move forward. So is that a similar approach, or do you say, hey, 1,000 investors, you're committed to X amount a year, or is this kind of they get to pick and choose where they want to back?
Yeah, it's the latter. They get to pick and choose, and that is probably one of the more celebrated aspects of our platform and this investment model. Being an LP in a big fund is great for somebody who's maybe not super interested in the actual technology or businesses that are being invested in, and they're looking to park a lot of capital and get some sort of returns. But this model, and it sounds like the one that you're representing with 90 Degree, I think it really favors folks that are more industry aware and want to evaluate individual deals on a deal by deal basis and opt in or opt out of each deal accordingly. And then if you have the right makeup of whatever members, if you will, within that ecosystem, it can be an incredibly powerful source of data in terms of selecting the right companies.
Yep, totally agree. So follow-on question, do you have any investment theses specifically with regards to the technologies that you're excited about right now with different markets that you're saying, hey, we think these ones are going to be explosive growth? At the end of the day, you are the face of a syndicated group of folks in the channel that have their own intelligence about the market. They know what they believe in, but obviously you're seeing deal after deal after deal, and deal flow is your specialty. So where do you think the future is? Where are the biggest seed and pre-seed and kind of growth markets today in cyber?
I think, I'll start with what I think has been a little bit overlooked in recent months or years with the onset of AI and the resulting hype behind that. And we'll talk about that specifically too, but we've always been focused on just enterprise tech, so all B2B. So if you look at a big venture firm's portfolio, a lot of times it's segmented between enterprise and consumer. We don't do anything on the consumer side, all enterprise. So that's cloud, cybersecurity, next gen infrastructure, things like, compute, data management, data storage, networking. And so I think it's important to remind folks that, the, whatever you call it, maybe the global 2000 of corporations that are building, they have these massive businesses, and then they have these tremendous data centers all over the world to run these businesses. Those companies still have increasing demand for what today is considered, I guess, kind of traditional infrastructure. So everything, all the software and hardware that would go into a data center like that, there's a ton of innovation in that space ongoing. It has not let up. It's only increased in terms of its speed. And so that will remain a focus for us. If I just had to pick one kind of category off the top of my head, I would say maybe application security. So SaaS, security seems to be a very, very in demand area right now for these companies. And so there's a lot of capital flowing into companies that are presenting solutions there. We could get into cyber in general. I mean, that seems to be kind of the way of the world. I feel like cybersecurity right now is kind of, if you remember back in the mainframe computing days, and then all of the individual components of mainframe computing were broken out and built into entire, products and industries, like even things like Cisco with the router. I feel like that's happening now and has been with cybersecurity. Like we didn't have, I think you're familiar with the API security space.
I am.
We didn't have things like that before. We had more general solutions, and now we have very specific point products, point technologies to solve a very specific, threat or vulnerability with APIs or shadow SaaS apps or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then, of course, artificial intelligence. We are not we are not focused on AI as a pure play investment, meaning we're not investing in pure AI companies, but we are investing in a lot of companies that are in that enterprise infrastructure space or cybersecurity that are leveraging AI technology to make their products and offerings better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally get that. I think that's a very astute view. To invest in raw AI is a very vague investment. To invest in applied AI is a very intelligent investment. I've been thinking and putting my own thesis cap on quite frequently around consolidation in the market. And, I actually wrote a piece just last night, wrote a little paragraph or two on, if we had if VC is in a bull or a bear state right now. In particular, let's scope this question down to, is cyber investing in a bull or a bear state? And the follow-on point to this is, given the 10,000 plus products, 3,000 plus companies in market today, is there room for more? Is there room for more unique siloed innovation that will be bought even though we're in a bit of a recessionary market? Or, does the CISO's balance sheet recession cause massive acquisition, massive M&A, massive roll-up by platform players such as Palo Alto, et cetera? And the short near-term view is that we're going to see consolidation before we see continued investment. I'd love to hear your opinion on where you think we are with regards to cybersecurity investment today, and whether the near-term future is all about M&A and roll-up, or whether now is a good time to be putting capital to work.
It's so interesting because it's actually, in my opinion, it's a little of both. Like M&A and roll-up will I think be a big thing for the foreseeable future. But I hesitate to generalize across the whole industry, because if you just look at the last, let's say 2 years, IPO market's basically frozen. The funding climate very dampened. It's been very, very difficult for a lot of startups that 3 years ago would have had no problem getting funding. Now they're struggling. Venture firms struggling accordingly, and a lot of them, quite frankly, will just not make the turn. They won't make it out of this alive. And so it's been, not to sugarcoat it, it's been a grim 18 months or 2 years, and that may continue for another few months, but not for everybody. So we have the luxury of not investing out of a big $1 billion fund into dozens and dozens of companies and having to make bets that maybe will work out, maybe will not work out. Instead, we're only looking at 5 or 6 companies a year to partner with, invest in, and run our program for. And so we work with companies that are kind of at the top of the heap all the time. And so while it's been bad times for a lot of firms and a lot of startups, there are still really, really great startups out there that are growing revenue, hiring, taking market share. Companies like Abnormal Security or Vast Data or Cohesity, these are very, very solid businesses that are continuing to grow, continuing to raise capital. And so I think, to answer your question, it really is a little of both, and it just kind of depends on where you are on that spectrum of quality of business and positioning for the future. I don't think we need more startups in each subcategory of cybersecurity. I think that's been part of the problem for the last several years. We don't need, I think to a point you want competition, but we don't need 6 or 7 or 8 API security companies, because what that does is it muddies the waters, if you will, for everybody, for the folks looking to fund these businesses, for the channel companies trying to figure out which ones to partner with and bring to market, and certainly for CIOs and CISOs that are trying to sort through the chaos and the noise of the industry and figure out which one of these companies will be around in 5, 6, 7 years, and which one has the best technology to meet the needs of my business. And so what that does is when you have too crowded of a market, it makes it more difficult for the truly great companies to rise up. And it just, sucks a lot of capital out of the market. So I don't know. I think
if I can just interject, particularly when half of those companies are pretending that they're completely unique and not competing with other companies that they're clearly competing with. Like it's almost confusing the market is almost a marketing strategy at this point.
It's crazy. That's such a great point. Like I talk to founder CEOs all the time, and one of the first questions I ask them is, who do you view as your competitors in 2 different categories? Like larger incumbent, big businesses that have been around for a long time, and then any startups that are kind of, just getting started and may be competing with you, or you might compete with in the future. And it's amazing to me how often the answer to that question is, well, nobody's really doing what we're doing. We're not, like, nobody's really competing directly with us, because that's more often not the case. So yeah, it's an interesting time because it's difficult, very difficult time for, I would say, the average or below average startup that years ago took advantage of just this free flow of capital, and now that spigot has been turned off. But it's still a great time for the truly, like, the top, whatever, 1 or 2 or 3% of these startups. So I guess in times like this, it pays to be a winner.
Right. And it's I suppose it's somewhat of an advantage, the fact that you're later in the cycle. B and C, like already some of those companies have been, we see quite a few get acquired, even pre-Series A these days, or they just don't even make it past that point. They don't raise that Series B, and they don't quite make it that far. So I wonder if that's one of the advantages that you see is, because your post revenue, or maybe that's the reason you've done it, is to kind of filter those out that aren't going to find a market fit and are never going to have significant revenue.
So I'm gonna jump in the middle of your answer, Chad, and I'm gonna say one thing. 100%, Adrian, you're absolutely spot on. And the best part about that comment is, unlike a traditional fund that has to take in, or that takes in hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and has to deploy this capital into an operating venture, the best thing and the cool thing about a syndicate model, which is what the Syndicate Group is in this SPV approach, is they don't have to put capital to work. There's no demand that says we've taken in $1 billion and it has to be put to work in the next 3 years. They get to put
not
it to
forced
work
to make
when
bad deals.
The company is right, and when the vision is right, and when the market is right, and when the investors want to be involved. Is that right, Chad?
I couldn't have put it better myself. So I don't mind you jumping in. It's absolutely right. Yeah.
All right.
It's
if you want to expand on that.
It's a luxury. And to be clear, there are trade-offs, right? Like, the later you invest, typically the trade-off is, so you get the added security of risk mitigation, if you will, on these investments, but you're also by definition going to have a lower average return or multiple on these investments. But if you do it right, you can hit a sweet spot and have a much higher success rate in terms of companies that return a profitable exit. And in our case, maybe it's the same with 90 Degree. It's like the inverse of a traditional VC model in terms of percentage of companies that return a profit. We're just, we're not chasing the 50, 60, 70x, the 1 out of 20 that's going to return, the rest.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So from here, I kind of wanted to, pardon the pun, but pivot into talking about the state of the current market. We followed really closely, and it's interesting coincidence right now that we actually have I think this is our very first security unicorn since June 2021, if I'm remembering correctly. We're going to talk about Island raising $100 million and getting a $1.5 billion valuation, which, unless I've missed something, there might be one company I've missed, but it is starting to look like things are coming back. And, we're hearing rumors about IPOs. So want to kind of get your thoughts on the market generally there. When we've had other investors on, they shoulders were shrugged, hands were thrown up. I think it was really difficult to call middle of last year, early this year. But are we getting closer to being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel?
I think so. I hope so. Yeah, I saw that Island raise, and that was encouraging. By the way, just another example of like companies that are on the right track and doing well, have no problem raising a big round at a big valuation, even in this environment. So yeah, just quick thoughts on what's next in terms of the IPO market and the industry in general. I think if you look back in history, I think going back 20 or 30 years, the last two times we've had this big of a slowdown in terms of like funding IPOs in particular, when we had like a virtual freeze on IPOs for more than a year. I think the first one was in 0102. Was it 2001 or 0102? And then again in 08, 09. Each time it didn't last more than, I think, 18 months, maybe 2 years at the most. And then the demand just caught up to it. And I think and hope that that's the case here. I mean, we're basically going on 2 years now, maybe not quite, not quite 2 years of no IPOs or virtually no IPOs. And I think the demand is coming back. We saw a couple of weeks ago, what were those? The chip manufacturer and I think it's Instacart. There's a lot of, those were hotly anticipated. They started off strong and then kind of came back down to original or below level. So it wasn't a great performance, but there are a lot of companies that are ready and there's demand, I believe, in the public markets for these companies. We have a few in our portfolio right now, probably 20% of the portfolio is ready, but a great example would be Cohesity. They filed their S1 in December of 21 for a planned IPO in the spring of 22, which is right when everything took a turn for the worse. And so they've been on hold ever since, but they're continuing to grow and become stronger, bigger as a business, and even more ready for an IPO. So I think companies like that, they will weather this storm and they'll come out of this ahead. So yes, I think by spring of next year, I'm not big on predictions, but I do believe by second quarter of next year, if not sooner, we'll start to see the tech IPO market loosening up, along with funding and raising for a lot of these startups.
And it's interesting, we didn't see it happen all at once. We actually had a graph where we showed both the security IPOs, which we steadily had, or not IPOs, sorry, unicorns. We steadily saw 2 to 3 new unicorns made every month. And that dropped off about a month or two after we saw the layoffs start. And I think really, I think it was OneTrust, I believe that's right, that laid off 1,000 people. That was really kind of the big indicator that there was trouble brewing there. So yeah, I think your other parts of the market took a little bit longer to feel the impact, but if anything, it's a little bit over 2 years. So it's good to see signs that it's going back.
Yeah, we'll see. I do, I have some concerns about next year being an election year, and there's obviously a lot of, global, political stuff happening, conflicts and everything. But from a timing perspective and just pure demand, in the industry and in the markets, I think it's there and we should be coming out of it next year.
All right. Sounds good. Tyler, do you have anything else before we wrap here?
No, it's great to get the time to chat with another investor and another person that runs a syndicate. It's super impressive that what you're working on here and what you've built. And I really love the alignment in incentives. I think that's just such a cool concept and cool model versus the traditional syndicate model. Man, it's such a unique approach.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It makes it fun. It definitely makes it fun.
Yep. So no other questions for me, Adrian.
Okay. Yeah, Chad, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. It's been an awesome conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
All right, and we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly Enterprise News.
Business Security Weekly is live streamed and recorded on Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Each week, we address the challenges facing CISOs through our guest interviews, including former and active CISOs. Our news segment is focused on leadership and communication to better help security leaders translate and communicate security risks into business risks. Jason Albuquerque, Ben Carr, Tyler Robinson, and others add their expertise to the conversation. I'm Matt Alderman, and I hope you search for Business Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher and subscribe to download our latest content.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Follow us on LinkedIn for updates across our organization, show highlights, and more. You can find us by searching for Security Weekly Productions. And now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can follow along with the news if you go to securityweekly.com/ESW337. You can see all the items we're potentially going to talk about today. There's 26 of them, so we might not get through all of them. But the first one here is our first unicorn in a long time. Island raises $100 million in Series C funding, which gives them a valuation of $1.5 billion. Look at that. Look at that dabbing unicorn.
I love it. I love it.
That's how long it's been since we've had a cybersecurity unicorn. We had to bring back dabbing to go back and find that image.
That is, yeah. Yeah, it's been a while. That unicorn's got a lot of gray hair.
Yeah. So yeah, I was kind of surprised to see this. They raised, both Island and Talon raised a ton of capital. And we were just talking about enterprise browsers in our first segment today. Though I don't really see Island or Talon competing with Google Enterprise. I mean, I almost see them as additive to this. And I still highly believe that, like the previous enterprise browser market, this is going to be, they're going to end up being a niche. Yeah, something you buy just for your contractors.
It's so tough to know. In this market downturn, in a situation where it's impossible for mid-level or worse startups to raise money, like I know one startup I'm involved with is absolutely killing it. Would have easily raised at a 250 to 300 million valuation 2 years ago, and is struggling to raise on 40 million of valuation today. And this company's killing it. They're doing very, very well, growing in a very healthy way. I can't see a situation where $100 million goes into a company like Island where they can't support it, where it's not already growing. So this just is mind-boggling. My mind is exploding in this situation because a market I thought didn't deserve to be there, in a situation where I've seen this playbook play out 3-4 times and it never gets to a touchdown. It always ends up being a punt. I'm just blown away. Good for them. And this is one of those situations when it came out, I immediately sent a message to Adrian, was like, WTF, dude, how does this even happen? Like, let's debate this on the show, because I just am not sure how a company in a market that has been attempted and failed multiple times over the last 10, 15 years that we've been tracking this market gets 100 million in this raising world without actually having something massive underneath the hood. They've got to have something. There has to be something there.
Yeah. I mean, I see it as a product that's a nice to have, not a must have. And if it's a must have, I still see it only being a must have for certain scenarios, like contractors for, like Fortune 100, which is, what they're talking about here. Multiple customers ranking in the top 20 of the Fortune 100. So, sure. Have they found market fit? Sure. Is that market worth what it's being valued at? I'm not so sure. I mean, A16Z was talking up Bromium left and right. You had Mark Andreessen talking about it being the, the highlight of the industry and fixing all this stuff. And they were pretty upside down on that sale to HPE. I think they raised 115 million and I think got acquired for 40, somewhere around that.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. What do you think of okay, so the market might be the enterprise buyer, the enterprise browser that exists within, say, highly regulated financial services, stock trading, et cetera, where all comms have to be monitored, et cetera. Sure, use cases like that, highly regulated use cases. What do you think about the storyline of enterprise CISOs, general enterprise CISOs saying, I want to secure all traffic to Chat GPT? Does that play into this equation where it's, hey, how do I stop my data being typed into Chat GPT or OpenAPI as they ask complex questions and have it captured by Chat GPT? One way to do that is to put it in the browser and limit access to Chat GPT or filter data. Like, you're now in the browser and you can exist in there and do essentially a browser-based DLP. Could that be a driving factor to the adoption? Or am I grasping at straws?
I think you're grasping. Well, so I think some people might be thinking that, but we know what happens when you block users from doing things that increase productivity. They just find a way around it, So they're gonna. Any place you install the Island or the Talon browser, they have to solve the problem of the other browsers that live on there. Like, what's going to stop? And I'm sure they've got some answer for that. Maybe
they got to have an EDR. They got to have an EDR on device too that'll stop the installation of competing browsers.
Well, you can't uninstall some of those native browsers, right? I'm not sure if you can fully uninstall them, but maybe you can block people from using them. But then, somebody pulls out their iPad or their iPhone, and they've got, that feature turned on where, they've got the Chat GPT app on their phone, or they just open it in the browser in their phone and just copy and paste the answer to their Chat GPT question. Because like on Apple, you can share your clipboard between your mobile devices and your Mac, right? So you can just copy it to the clipboard in your phone, paste it right into whatever your Google Doc on your laptop. Just like attackers, users will find ways around things that block productivity. So I think more likely, I think we have to find ways for users to use things like ChatGPT securely, or we have to give them alternatives because the impact is just too big on business productivity there.
Yeah.
And
so just to provide,
I don't think an enterprise browser is gonna do that. You're gonna be looking at other products there, I think.
So just to provide color to the black and white photo that we're all looking at right here, that 100 million raise brings it to 385 total invested in this company since Feb 1 of 2022 and does not include their seed round, which is not listed with an amount on Crunchbase. So 100 million A, 115 B, a couple of strategics totaling 70, and then another 100 million C in 18 months. In 18 months. Is there massive growth there, or should we be like, hey, you're selling a bill of goods here, guys?
We don't know churn until year 2, year 3. Like product hasn't even existed long enough to see if customers are actually getting value out of it. If we go back to FireEye, FireEye was the hottest thing ever for a while there, and it took kind of like 3-4 years in before you started to see massive customer churn go to their competitors who found a different go-to-market with a different licensing scheme. And then that kind of, I don't know how much money spent on malware analysis sandboxes that grab stuff on the network anymore. Like it seems like that's probably not a big market anymore.
And Tyler's probably not going to like me very much for saying this, but investments don't necessarily mean that the investor believes in the company and the product. They believe that they're going to get a good return on their investment, and that is a very different calculation.
For sure. Very, very astute of you, KT.
And investments are not tied to product efficacy. Yeah.
Yeah, but listen, man, when you're putting 100 million in, there's no magical I don't know if y'all are TikTok people, but there's no girl math, boy math, or in this case, investor math that you can really do in this situation when you're taking in $100 million that doesn't necessitate a company being successful. Like 100 million is.
But success is very different than either longevity.
Not anymore, Katie. Not anymore. Now they're much more tightly correlated. Today, investments like that are much more tightly correlated. A year ago, totally get it. Agree with you 100%, right? I know of a company, I won't say the name, that was at about 6 million in ARR when they raised 100 million. They were at 6 million in ARR and raised 100 million. Now, if you're at 6 million in ARR, you are raising, your valuation is like maybe 40. Like you're not raising 100 million. So it's just a different time.
That's true. There is a market correction that has gone on that doesn't mean some people aren't using the old playbook. I don't know anything about this company. Let's just
I'll tell you what, if my GPs are using an old playbook like that, I'm pulling my money out of that fund tomorrow.
Oh, for sure. But do you think that means it's not happening?
I like to think that most investors aren't that dumb, but who knows? I've been shocked before.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm going back and using examples here. But we've seen, we didn't think, FireEye bought Mandiant. They brought on Dave DeWalt. Like we didn't think they could fail. Like that was some hot stuff. And then I think they sold for 2.2x, something like that.
No, that's mind-boggling to me. And it's funny, I did not remember those data points. Adrian, for the audience, Adrian and I immediately, as soon as this announcement came out, we started slacking each other, trying to be like, whoa, what's going on here? And he brought up that FireEye data point, and I did not realize they only sold for 2.2x invested capital. That is amazing to me. Or they IPO'd for 2.2x, I should say, not sold.
No, they were acquired. SPG, the private equity firm that picked them up, sold them off for 2.2x after splitting out the Mandiant portion, which of course we know the Mandiant story. Mandiant was the real piece of FireEye that was worth some money and went to Google for, I forget what the number was, like 8x, 10x, 11x. I think it was 11. It was a lot more than 2.2. But and then the remainders of FireEye went into Trellix. And
wow, okay.
Because SPG also acquired both RSA and McAfee and broke up and split all that stuff out, which is why Archer's now an independent company. The RSA conference is now an independent company. SPG has just been parsing out all the old stuff.
Investor math.
Yeah, and FireEye had negative 3% growth at the time that they combined it with McAfee Enterprise to make Trellix.
But they're doing okay now, publicly traded company. If they're not growing a little bit, they'd be in the dumper. But I mean, they're not massive, but they're doing okay.
Who? Which
FireEye,
one?
Right?
Trellix?
Oh. Am I? Is there no FEYE?
The remainder of FireEye is
I'm just dumb.
So what used to be FireEye?
There are no dumb investors, right, Tyler?
Just one, Katie.
I think the only thing that still has the McAfee name is the consumer side.
Oh no, I get emails from McAfee all the time. They're totally valid.
Katie, I used to like you. I don't anymore.
Just all the enterprise McAfee stuff was rebranded as Trellix a couple of years ago.
Yeah, there is no FEYE anymore. So just goes to show you the last time I thought about buying any FEYE stock. So
yeah, SPG took them private.
Wow, just goes to show you.
So yeah, it's I mean, to sum up, I think it's just too early. I mean, any company that raises $400 million in 18 months. I don't know.
That's a lot of money in a short time.
All right. Here's the bet, Adrian. I'm going to bet a bottle of bourbon with you. A decent bottle, nothing crazy. A decent bottle.
Okay, yeah, you have to specify. You can't just say
under $100. Under $100.
It's a wide range.
Yeah, under $100. A bottle of bourbon that they sell for 3x invested capital, which puts them at a unicorn status.
3x invested capital?
Yeah,
well, that's what they're valued at right now. Yeah. You think they're going to sell at what they're valued right now?
Well, that's the over-under I'm setting for you. Would you take the under or no?
No, I'll take the under.
Okay, there you go. All right, lock it
Yeah,
up. Everybody heard it. This has been publicly stated. I got them at 3 times 385 million. Or up.
Yeah, I don't think they break $1 billion.
Woo! This sounds fun.
Under
I
exit.
think it's there. I think the market's there. I don't think these investors. Listen, I don't think Prism Capital. I don't even know
I think
who
if
they
they
are.
sell
Georgian.
now, I think if they sell now or very soon, you'll win this bet. I think if they hold out, they're going to lose it.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. So when Island sells, we get to rub it in somebody's nose.
It wouldn't be fun otherwise. I like a good bet. All right. Other unlikely funding. Census secures $75 million. Started off as, if I recall correctly, a college project. I want to say this was, or maybe it was the other one that Rapid7 was working on, was part of University of Michigan. But I'm pretty sure Census started off as some kind of university project and then turned into a commercial business. And it's not a huge Series C, but $75 million is a pretty good raise in this market.
Yeah, that's a fairly serious raise for a market that should have been absorbed into something else, right? So Census plays in the EASM, ASM space.
Most of this market's exited already. The external attack surface management space, yeah.
That's right.
Well,
this is a bag holding problem,
now.
Right? So go ahead, Katie.
They're pivoting now from external attack surface management into exposure management. That is the next, quote, big thing, unquote. Yes, if you can't see Tyler's face, if you're just listening, he's giving a really, snarky, sarcastic, as he should be, because this is chasing a new term. It's chasing a new term that has been created in an effort to create a market which vendors are going to go to, because once again, there are going to be some companies, not a lot, but who are going to profit big if they move quickly and first, because the analysts are going to hype them up. The market's going to be all excited about it, and exposure management is, quote, the next big thing, unquote, after, the threat hunting, the XDR market, because it adds in so-called prioritization schema to allow companies to react or act more proactively than before. So this is where that's coming into play, that sort of market buzz that is founded on hopes and dreams. I'm not saying Census has bad technology. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying it has pivoted from a market that is slowly dying a painful death into something that has a new name that makes it sound exciting versus necessarily innovating on something that's different.
This is exactly what we were talking about with Chad earlier. This is trying to confuse the market. Innovation in buzzwords is what we're seeing here. I'm looking at the website, and they've got a little diagram here. It's exactly the same thing Psychognito and everybody else is doing in the external attack surface management space. So Gartner's going to continue filing them under EASM, and they can use whatever name they want, but they're not doing anything different than their competitors using the old
Forrester is pushing exposure management.
Okay, well, so two different names for the same thing.
Exactly. But exposure management is the quote next best thing.
But what's their exit? IBM's acquired here. Microsoft's acquired. Palo Alto Networks is acquired. Rapid7 is acquired. Tenable is acquired. 3 or 4 insurance companies have acquired in this market.
Potato. They'll get picked up. Somebody will buy them. The question is, how big? Just a point of reference, 130% ARR growth, fantastic number, but it's not over 12 months. That's over the last 18 months, because that was since the last funding round. So 130% over the last year and a half. That's good, right? It's not your 3x, 2x, or 3x approach you typically want as a early to mid-stage investor. But in today's market,
starting point,
hey, that makes sense.
Over or under $1 million, though?
What's that, bud?
Was the starting point for that growth more or less than $1 million, though?
Well over $1 million. Well over $1 million. Absolutely.
Yeah, it got to be to raise a Series B of this size, right?
Well over $1 million. Yeah, they're at $10 million or more in revenue. I would bet money on that.
Yeah, I don't think they would have landed. Yeah, they wouldn't land this other way, right?
My bigger question here isn't the investment. I think the investment's kind of okay, right? The number's fine. It's going to buy them another 3+ years of runway. They'll take a run at the market. They're going to hope the market returns underneath them. And the reality here is, if it does return underneath them, this investment round, the Series C round led by Decibel Partners, was probably done at a valuation that is very, very reasonable. And if that's the case, the idea here is that, hey, if we can get 3 more years out of this, simply the market turning around underneath them could give them enough growth in the investment to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, led by Decibel, but that was for $50 million of it. The other $25 million came from Silicon Valley Bank.
The artist formerly known as?
No, both SVB Capital and Silicon Valley Bank, a division of First Citizens Bank.
Interesting. So it's probably done as a venture debt component to the actual equity investment. It's a combo platter. Just guessing there.
I think that's the first time I've seen SVB's name attached to any kind of fundraising in a very long time.
Yeah, it is debt financing. It says October 24th, $25 million debt, $50 million of equity. That's exactly right. And not only though, the other thing I'll tell you is, look, this is a C round, and it's a party round. Decibel, Google Ventures, Greylock, and Intel split the $50 million. None of these guys are going all in on this company.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, since this, so I did a lot of research into this market testing in this market, and honestly, in 2021, I didn't include them in my testing because they just weren't far enough along to be included in the test with their external attack surface management product. So this product's less than 2 years old at this point. That they're raising money on. And they pivoted away from just internet scanning, right? Like the old product, the old Shodan product was just, I scan the whole internet and you pay me a very small, subscription fee. It was almost a consumer product to be able to query my database of the internet. So, and I mean, in their favor, Microsoft acquired RiskIQ also less than 2 years after they pivoted into this market as well. So, you can get an exit, after a very brief pivot. So.
You can, as long as all the girls aren't already dancing with somebody else. That's the hard part, right? When you're the last one standing on the wall at the dance,
got to find a partner. I mean, the thing that works in their favor is anybody and everybody can get some value out of external attack surface management. Like I mentioned before, Palo Alto's got one, Microsoft's got one, IBM's got one, insurance companies are buying them. So I mean, it's in vogue to kind of use this external scanning, for company reputation, as a way to measure a company. It's wrong to do so, but that's what BitSight and Security Scorecard have been doing for a long time now. So that increases their chances of an exit. They got more options.
And I think we're what, 30 plus minutes into this conversation, and we've gone through 2 of 20 something articles.
Yes.
We're killing it today, buddy.
Any more of the funding that you guys want to discuss? Because that was really pretty much it for me. I didn't get a chance to really dive into many of these other ones. Didn't you mention Harmonic earlier?
I did not, no.
What was the H startup that you mentioned? Harness. Okay.
Yeah, and they're a massive company now. They're doing really well, growing like crazy. Harmonic is doing secure generative AI deployments, deep fake detection platform, Reality Defender. I like that name. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little cheesy on that one, but I like that name, Reality Defender. Secures $15 million in Series A. I kind of, deep fake detection, that's kind of a cool concept. Worth $15 million? I don't know, but still kind of a neat idea.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting interesting to see what kind of legs these companies that are. So you're talking about companies that are all in on AI, being a bit of a risk, or Chad was. Both of you guys were talking about that.
Yeah.
These are companies that are all in on the companies that are all in, right? They're facing. Yeah,
I've followed that market pretty close, and there's no way I'd put money to work in a pure play AI security company. Now, if it's a company that's using AI to analyze data in a way that provides a value proposition that has real value to a customer, I'm in. I don't think we're ready for, it's like buying, it's like investing in a company that does insurance for flying cars today. Really? Don't you think you might be a little bit early, right? So it's a similar kind of vibe for me when it comes to traditional pure AI sec.
Yeah. And honestly, if you actually look at the news today, we don't have a whole lot to talk about. Basically, there's a big chunk of funding. A couple of just sort of interesting things like the hacks here are kind of fun stuff to talk about. Then there's the big Okta breach that happened less than a week ago.
That one's massive.
And we got a few essays here and then some squirrel stories. So we're actually doing pretty good.
I think we're done seeing the end of the Okta breach. I think that Okta breach is one of dozens of. So for those that don't know, and I'm going to TLDR it because I'm not an expert in it. So Adrian, if you've deep read it, please feel free to correct me. But my understanding is Okta got breached, and in the process, some of their support desk processes got breached, allowing the attackers to grab, I forget what they're called, HAR packages, which contain the primary keys to some of their customers' Okta deployments, allowing for complete compromise of that customer. So the question is, how many of these HAR, if they're called the HAL, HAR, whatever they are, packages were compromised? And it could be on the order of a dozen or dozens, in which case you'll see a cascading effect of these compromises going through more and more target companies over time.
So I spent all day looking, a good chunk of yesterday reading up on this. And so an HAR file is just a web session. So if you're trying to troubleshoot an issue with a website, you can F11 pop open the web developer tools, which is illegal in Missouri, as we all know. According to the, some politicians in Missouri. And you can go to the network tab and you can record your session. You can hit record. You can log into a website. It's going to save all that. And if you're trying to troubleshoot something with a SaaS vendor or identity vendor like Okta, their support people are probably going to have you go through this process, save the HAR file. The HAR file is going to have everything from that session in it, including any OAuth keys generated, all the back and forth that occurred in that while you were recording. And it's just a single file. It's a text file you can just open in a text editor. So it's really easy to scrub, which if you look at Okta's instructions, they do warn you to sanitize your HAR file before handing it off to their support people. But I suspect nobody ever does this because it's not easy to do by hand. You have to know what you're looking. You have to know what an OAuth key looks like in this context. But number 13 is a 6-year-old handy little tool that can automatically do some of that work for you called HAR Sanitizer. And that's why I included that here. So this is something that Okta could have automated on their side to protect their customers for a scenario like somebody hacking into their support website. And so that's what happened is they hacked into their support portal where all the customers' recorded sessions had been uploaded. And we don't know from Okta how long the attackers were in there. Most of what we know are from 3 high-profile security vendors that got hacked through this, through their access to the support portal and these HAR files. And that was Cloudflare, 1Password, and BeyondTrust. And from the really helpful details that they've given us, absolutely, we can suspect there are way, way, way more Okta customers impacted than this. But it's interesting that the 3 we know about are all pretty big. These are not startups, pretty big security companies.
The trickle down here is going to be a big problem because we don't know the N. We don't know the number of HARs that were compromised. And this just could result in company after company after company just getting absolutely wrecked. And from an impact on stock market kind of scenario, I don't know if you guys noticed when this was announced, there was an actual 11% decline in the stock, in the Okta stock on that day. And it's been kind of fluttering around that 11% dump. It's the first time in a while I've seen a breach actually result in a material impact to stock. And I wonder if
12% impact Okta alone, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering if the market's smart enough to understand how important this hack has the potential to be. We don't really know. I've even had investor friends reach out to me saying, "Hey, should I short it? Like, what's going on? Give me a TLDR on what this means." And the end of the day, the difficulty of this scenario is we just don't know how broad the impact could be over time.
Right. We need those details from Okta, and they're not sharing them.
If this is dozens, a dozen, 2 dozen, think about that. Think about the erosion of trust that will happen to Okta as a identity provider. Like when an identity provider gets hacked, that is so massively different than when a general company gets hacked, because the identity provider has to have the trust of every single one of its customers to operate.
And it's like the third significant incident they've had in 2 years too. This isn't the first time their name has come up. They can point to one of the early ones being a contractor that they outsourced support to, but does it really matter? Like if the customer's negatively impacted, like it's their responsibility. Doesn't really matter.
They're a target. They're a target for a reason. They're a target because they're a central cog in the security of many other companies. And so you get a voice multiplication. You get a multiplier attack. You take one down, you compromise dozens. And that's kind of like back in the day when I was more offensively focused, I always looked for situations where I could compromise one thing that would lead to the downfall of dozens of other things, right? And even if it's, one target within a company that would lead to other targets within that same company, this is just on a bigger, broader scale. So as an attacker, this is nirvana.
So they should have been able to invalidate all the OAuth keys in those HAR files. I mean, that's what the very first thing I would have done if I were Okta. But at a bare minimum, so 1Password, they saw their first attack on September 29th, and then Cloudflare saw their first attack on October 18th. So that's a big time period for the attackers to go in, hit a whole bunch of companies, make a whole bunch of mess. So we could continue to see fallout from this, even though it should be handled at this point, at least from Okta's point of view. But we don't know what happened. How many days is that? That's nearly 3 weeks. Yeah, over 3 weeks.
It's scurry.
Yep. I mean,
we saw the SolarWinds thing a few years ago. Everybody said, watch out, watch out, watch out. And companies they said, oh yeah, initially, and then complacency set in. But this is definitely, if you're an attacker, this is the way to go, right? Because, you find one big target, may take a little bit longer. In this case, it doesn't sound like it was super complicated, but exact same thing with SolarWinds. We saw the fallout for months and months and months and months, and we probably won't ever know the extent, really.
Yeah, and it did take, we were still hearing news stories about fallout from SolarWinds months later, right? And we're not even at a week yet, so I would expect to hear more. I mean, the bright light I see here is in the reports that we've got from BeyondTrust, Cloudflare, and 1Password. Like, they've kind of validated a lot of different things, like zero trust principles, saved their butts here. They were actually able to detect these attacks within minutes of their happening in some of these cases here. So certainly, and that's why they're talking about it publicly, right? Like, they did a good job. They have a good story to tell.
Right. If all of their data was just splat, this would be a very different lessons learned.
They would have a post as short as Okta's, right? Like not these long, like here's all the details, here's the timeline. But still, it's good to see some vendors saying, look, we did the work, we stopped the attack, we detected the attack. This is how security is supposed to work, because this is not a test of their products in any of these cases. This is a test of their corporate IT security. That's where each of these security companies got hit. And same with Okta. Okta's product wasn't hacked. They went after the low-hanging fruit, which was the support infrastructure, which is where a lot of companies are like, we'll just hire some contractors, we'll throw up a Confluence server or something like that, and that's how we'll manage support. Not thinking about all the customer secrets going in there. But yeah, literally, they were storing plain text secrets in this site, not protecting those plain text secrets of customers. That's how you have to think of it when you're designing security. We just invited all our customers to upload their plain text passwords and OAuth keys. When you think about it like that, you're like, how could we have let this happen? But that's typically not how you think about it. If you're not walking through the support people process, like I'm sure somebody somewhere was assuming, everybody's sanitizing their HAR files before they upload them. Surely. But if you talk to somebody in support, they'd be like, yeah, no, that never happens, dude.
Well done.
Nobody does that.
Well done.
All right. What else we got here? Katie, anything in the news today that you want to touch on before we wrap?
Anything in particular?
You can talk about your latest. I didn't catch your latest newsletter, so I don't know what it was about.
What was mine? Oh, yeah. It was just about. Again, this is gonna poke at Tyler a little bit.
Oh, really?
Why am I the easy target? Come on now.
It was part one of why starting a cybersecurity business for a big payout is a big mistake. Actually, I don't think Tyler would necessarily disagree with what I wrote. But yeah, it's all about, cybersecurity is a good field to get into. You can just look at this list, right? 3 months ago, 6 months ago, we did not have 12 funding stories, right? We had 2 or 3 because it was like a desert out there. And now we're seeing, even though the market has not rebounded quite yet, we're seeing funding for cybersecurity companies because it's like moths to a flame. And the last interview talked about that too, right? Like there's so much money going into companies doing very, very similar, if not exactly the same things, and it's very tempting for somebody with an idea to enter the market because they're going to get funding, and the hope is that they're going to become the next unicorn and exit. And wow, is that a massive mistake?
But if enough moths dive at the flame all at once, they won't all get burned. Some of them will come out unscathed.
That's what everybody's hoping on. And so this two-part series talks about why it's a really, really bad idea. The second part comes out, I think, next week. Yeah. And it talks about, and it's a very, very abbreviated list of all the crap you got to think about if you want to take a company public or get acquired. And it's like, like I said, very, very, very abbreviated list. And even that is like, whoa, no thanks, not for me. I'm going to sell ice cream.
It is interesting because the whole investment model is designed for large amounts of failure, right? Because you're going to get some big returns. But we don't typically see that in security. So it will be interesting going forward if security begins to resemble a more traditional market in terms of failure.
So I'm gonna press back on you a little bit there. We do see that. The only problem is you don't actually hear the names of many of the failures. So
we don't.
What I mean by that is
there's no big press announcement when a company closes for the most part.
Right.
But anytime there's a huge success, the founders are lauded. They're, rolled out at conferences, and everybody's like, ooh. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting and I say this in the second part, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a lot of money and be financially secure and take care of the people you love. Nothing. It's just a ginormous risk, and if you're willing to risk your house, your financial future, that of your children, et cetera, go for it. But don't expect a 7+ figure return on it. That's the wrong way to be thinking about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The majority of cyber startups fail. The only difference is you don't hear about them because they fail before you've heard about them, before they get big enough, before they get broad enough. And I know this because I see deal flow, and I've been watching deal flow for 10 years. And I see all these names go by. I see the pitch after pitch after pitch, and then never hear from them again. Right? These things all die early, die on the vine, maybe get a seed round and then die on the vine. You only hear about the successful ones. And even the mid-level successful ones are successful exits for the founders, right? They're going to be 7-figure exits for the founders. But the majority of them do die on the vine, whether you think that's the case or not. When you start to really look into the quantity, for every 10,000 products or 3,000 companies that are in market, there's probably 10x that give it a go. And that's exaggerating, but you get the point.
What
and actually, Adrian helped me a while back. We were talking about, I'll be as vague as I can, a particular company that advertised its acquisition as this massive success. And it was private, so no numbers were published.
And it wasn't.
And Adrian helped me find the data on this company, and it was an acqui-hire.
Yep.
And so it was publicized as being super duper success. But when you broke it down, it was like, okay, like you said, the founders probably got $1 million or $2 million each. And then the rank and file, of which there weren't many, got, I don't know, 10, 15K.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, they didn't get a 7-figure payout in a lot of those. They got hired. They got to keep a job.
They got to stay employed. That's right.
Their paychecks continued. That was it in a lot of these cases. So do you include that when you say dying on the vine, like those bad exits? Are you including those in that?
I think I'm being
literally like
generalizing.
Close the bank account, lay off the employees, send the last checks out.
No, I think I'm generalizing, good versus bad exits. And I think what Katie's bringing up is, when you go into a startup, I think a lot of the individual contributors or even managers up through the E staff to a degree think they're going to have some kind of big potential for big exits. And you got to understand the power law curve of VC. That's not there. Most people don't get it, period, full stop. If you get it, consider yourself super lucky that you timed it right. You did everything that needed to be done, and you timed it right against market dynamics and significant quantity of things that are well outside of anybody's control within the business. And so chalk it up to what it is. It's a big portion luck and a big portion preparedness and working hard, right? But the problem that I have with a lot of this is, and I think this is what Katie's getting to, is the outsized returns for the investors. The investors make all the money, all of it. The vast majority of it. The second biggest exiters are the founders, 2 people, generally 1 to 3 people. And then everybody else makes negligible money, right? The executive staff may make some good cash. Everybody below that makes nada, right? And that's the truth for most startups that don't hit the massive unicorn, high growth, insane exit multiple. And that's the reality is that's going to be 90+% of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
go ahead.
I think the opportunity for a duo, is maybe once every 5 years. And I mean, we're looking at 11 fundings this week alone.
Yeah.
Just know what you're getting into, I think, is the moral of the story.
Yeah, it's too much work, it's too much risk, it's too much pressure, and people don't think about it. And you can talk to people who have worked in cybersecurity startups who are the rank and file, and some people will go, oh, okay, I got a $10, $15, $25, $30,000 payout. First of all, that's not life-changing money for most people who are gainfully employed in this industry. And second of all, oh, by the way, it's a startup, so you didn't even get a 401k. So that's not like just it's.
Well, let's
what did you call
just
that?
add a little
Basic
bit
math,
of fuel to
the
that
TikTok
fire,
math,
Katie.
whatever.
Let's say that you make it a $200,000 or $250,000. Let's say you cash $250,000 on this. It took you 6 years to do it. Amortize it. That's a bonus. That's an annual bonus in today's economy, right? That's not even a massive exit, even at $250,000. And so it's just the economics of the situation are very, very difficult for most employees. And I think you bring up an excellent point that most people don't know what they're getting into. Most people think, startups, I'm going to kill it. This is going to be amazing. Yay. It's not generally how it works.
Right. Well, that was a super duper rabbit hole.
It was. And who knows if the team gets to the rabbit hole graphic fast enough, but if they do, that's awesome. If they do, there it is. I knew they would. As soon as I said that, I'm like, that graphic's coming up in a heartbeat. These guys are on point. But yeah, but you're not wrong, Katie. Totally right.
One thing I did like before we get to Squirrel Story was that HDMI adapter. It's scary, but kind of funny at the same time.
It doesn't really run code like it. It's kind of like an NFC tag, like the limit of what you can do with that. Like you can make a URL open on a device, is what it sounds like. And then if you continue trusting it from there, like you're on your own, but still kind of funny.
It's just kind of ridiculous. It made me laugh while I was reading it, so that was a good one.
Yeah, and let's see. So we got time for our 2 squirrel stories here. I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about with either of them. It's mostly nerd humor. Number 25, how to exit Nano. The joke there is that Nano is not difficult to exit like VI. But they're acting as if it is. So it's just some nerd humor there.
Adrian, stop right there. I'm a VI guy. If I can exit VI, literally anybody can exit VI.
And WQ bang.
That's right.
It's not that hard to remember, but I think that's the joke, right? How to exit Nano is that if it's hard to exit VI, then why not Nano? And then I think I follow the person on LinkedIn that the second squirrel story is about, because I've seen so many of these visualizations of the CISA. So where you see Kev is the known exploited vulnerabilities list that CISA's been making. These are vulnerabilities that they've actually seen maliciously used by attackers in the wild. So really useful list, because there's 200,000 vulnerabilities out there. So, having a list of less than 1,000 really helps you prioritize your patching and your fixing vulnerabilities. But yeah, people have been going nuts with throwing these into all sorts of different visualizations and that aren't they're impressive to look at, but you can't really do anything with them. Like, oh look, Microsoft is the biggest one. Big shocker.
I do like the pretty force-directed fireworks vulnerability graph. That's good. If it came with little pew-pew sounds, that would be awesome.
Pew-pew. These are great graphs. Like the last graph there, what is this called? The chord diagram. It's called a chord diagram. Looks amazing. Like, I don't want to try and glean any insights from it. I get a headache before I get any insights out of it.
Completely useless, but really cool looking.
I would love to have it hanging as art, though.
Completely cool looking.
I mean, I do
useless.
really like this fireworks diagram. Maybe I'll print it out, put it on my wall. I can totally, just like this guy, make up what it means. It's great.
Yeah, they do have value, maybe. Artwork. Yep.
And although this was written tongue-in-cheek, obviously, it's a quick, fun read. It is kind of a commentary on our market.
Shout out to my cybersecurity data science friends. We see you.
it is kind of a, well, guys, here's what we're doing, and people will 100% think you're super smart if you have these pretty visualizations and say some pithy but generic things.
And I have no idea who authored this, so as far as I can tell, they're anonymous. But maybe it is somebody I know in the data science world that authored this. I can think of a few people that have this sense of humor.
It's pretty good. I like it. Tyler is ready to go, or he's drunk, or both.
Nah. No comeback to that, Tyler? What are you petting? Are you petting one of the squirrels?
He's petting the squirrel. He's also muted.
Yeah, I'm talking into mute. I'm petting the squirrel. He's a good squirrel.
Yeah. Apologies to anyone listening to the audio format of this. We have squirrels on screen that we can interact with. So. All right. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun. This episode is a lot of fun. Got double the amount of Tyler today, so I'm happy about that. And Katie, I appreciate you being with me all day today. I enjoyed all our interviews and conversations.
Pleasure as always, Adrian.
All right, Katie, I'm gonna miss the pumpkin stuff.
You will. I will report back. I'll take pictures and taunt you with it.
Take pictures. Yeah, at least I can look at it and drool from afar.
I can also send you the recipes and you can make them.
That works too. I will take you up on that. All right, a big thanks to everyone for watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will be back next week.